In this tutorial, you will learn how to build a full stack app using NuxtJS, a Vue framework for the front end, NestJS framework, which is built on top of ExpressJS for the API and the backend, and DataStax's AstraDB for the NoSQL cloud database. And of course, we'll be using GitHub Copilot as our AI pair programming partner. The features we'll build, you'll see behind me. We'll probably build list members, create members with a form, and if we get time, search members as well. And you should see how straightforward it is to do this and how much fun it is at the same time. This type of functionality underpins everything you want to do. Job platform, blog platform, e-commerce platform. It's kind of the same thing and just added with more functionality. We might make it look slightly differently because I'm using Vuetify for the first time, so we might change it slightly, look a bit different to what I have behind me. To make the most out of this tutorial, make sure you have Node.js installed with version 12 or above, and also you will need a free DataStax account for the database. There's a link in the description below. Although I'll be demonstrating GitHub Copilot in this tutorial, it is not required. You can still do everything that you'll see here. Let me give a brief explanation of the tools we're going to be using. We're going to be using NuxtJS. It's an intuitive Vue framework, an open source framework making web development simple and powerful. It has a really great wizard when you start and creating an application. It asks you if you want to use Yarn or NPM, if you want to use Bootstrap, Material, Vuetify, other UI frameworks, Tailwind, etc., and also what testing frameworks you want to use. Such a great way to start an application. We'll also be using NestJS, and it's a framework built with efficiency, scalability on Node for server-side applications. It uses progressive JavaScript and fully supports TypeScript, which is what we'll be using today, but we'll be keeping it very JavaScript-esque. So don't worry about the TypeScript side. And you can use OO, you can use functional reactive programming, so many things you can do in Nest. And if you'd like a deep dive into that, do let me know. Because under the hood, Nest makes use out of Express, and it can also be configured with Fastify as well if you prefer. Although it gives it a great abstraction above these tools, it doesn't limit what you can do. NestJS exposes all the APIs underneath the framework, for example, Express or Fastify, as well as giving you lots of its own awesome API and functionality. So what is DataStax? DataStax built an API gateway into Astra to give developers a natural data API stack which meshes with the Jamstack or any other JavaScript framework that you like. Astra is built on top of the rock-solid database, NoSQL engine, Apache Cassandra, which powers Netflix, Instagram, Yelp, iCloud, and so many other apps that we use every day. It's all open source, no surprise. This is me here. And what I love is there's multiple ways to connect. In this tutorial, we're going to be connecting via their JavaScript SDK, which goes over their document API. But they have a fully functional REST API, GraphQL, and CassandраQL. So many things that we can do. Links to all of these below. And GitHub Copilot is introduced in June 2021. It's an AI pair programming partner. It gives you not only suggestions, but whole line suggestions, entire function suggestions, documentation, and so much more. It works with VS Code and code spaces. It is currently, at the time of making this video, mid-July 2021, in technical preview, which means you can sign up to get early access, and there's a waiting list. The sooner you sign up, the sooner you'll get access. Have a go and let me know what you think. So the first thing we're going to do is probably create the front end in a basic way, and then we'll add the API in a basic way, and then we'll add the database, and we'll get it all working, the still thread working front to back, like the full stack, and then we'll add more fidelity. Let's see how we get on. This is my plan. Things might change as we work together on this. And when you're building your app, remember, try and build something slightly differently so you can remember it, and also challenge yourself in a slightly different way. And if you want to build it in a different way, that's also fine. Sometimes you're feeling a bit creative. Sometimes you want to dig into deep logic. See what works for you and what mood you're in and what goes with the flow. So let's get started. So I'm in the repos directory on my laptop, and I'm going to make a directory. I want to call it NuxtJS, NestJS, Copilot. Create that folder. And I want to put the front end and the back end in the same folder. So a mono repo style. And you could do that, or you could have it as separate repos as well. I'm quite keen to having separate repos, but for simplicity now, I'm going to have it in one. Well, I say for simplicity, some things are easier, some things are harder. But for this demo, it's going to make things simpler, I think. Let's see how we get on. I'm going to go into the new folder that I've created, and it's completely empty. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the Nux documentation and click Get Started. And it's going to help us. It's going to ask if we want Yarn, NPX, or NPM. I'm going to go for NPM. and you use this command. So it's npm init nuxt app and the name of your project. I'm going to call the name of the project UI, so therefore it creates a UI folder in our repo. Project name UI, I'm happy with that. We are going to use JavaScript for the front end, although I am a big TypeScript fan. We'll use npm, definitely an npm fan. I haven't used Vuetify before. I mean, this works with Tailwind and so many others that I haven't even heard of, but I'm going to go with Vuetify. Let's see how we get on with that. And we will use Axios for HTTP. And I would recommend turning on the linter and prettier, but for now, to keep things simple, I'm not. I also recommend using Cypress for testing the front end, but for now, I'm not going to have any testing framework. And we'll go for a single page app, and we'll do node hosting, and we will select JS config because it's recommended for VS Code when you're not using TypeScript. What's my GitHub username? That is correct. We will choose no GitHub repo because I am putting it in a mono repo and I don't want sub repos in there. So I'm going to select none. If you do select a Git repo, you can actually delete the .github folder in the subdirectory and you will lose that history in that repo style. And we're going to have to do that with Nest because Nest doesn't give us the option to create a project without having Git set up. Nux is done. It says navigate into the UI directory and then run npm run dev. Okay, let's see how the project looks. Okay, it's building it. The first time takes a little bit longer. Okay, it's done. It's now recommending that we go to localhost. That's a weird number. Port already in use. And so now it's suggesting this port. The port shouldn't be in use. It is in use on my other screen. My bad. So let's stop that again. So if you get that, don't be scared. Read the error that comes back and then you can fix it. Okay, now it's listing on 3000, which is the normal port it should listen on. And this is what the app will look like default, created by Nux. I think it looks great. Okay, so what we want to do next is let's change this page. Let's hard code a list of what we kind of want it to look like. So let's have a look. So let's open VS Code. I don't think we've opened that yet. So what we can do is open a new terminal. We're in the UI directory. Let's go up one. So therefore, we'll be able to have the UI and API within VS Code together. So let's open VS Code. We've got the UI folder. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So this is the assets folder. This is where you're going to want to put your SCSS files before they're compiled, and they'll end up in the static directory where you put your public files like favicon or images, etc. and so on. And then you have a components directory. This is where you put your Vue components. We won't be using this today to keep things super simple, but I recommend that you do use it, and maybe you want to make some improvements to my project and put it into components. The layout is the bit that goes around your pages that's consistent. It can change, but it's usually consistent between multiple pages. We'll leave that for default for now. Node modules, I'm sure you're familiar with. And pages, this is where we'll be. So if I open index.vue, we will see welcome to Vuetify plus NuxtJS templates. If I go back to the browser, that is what we see here. So let's just rename that and make sure it all works. Welcome to EdiHub. Save it. It should automatically reload without me doing anything, and you can see it says welcome to EdiHub. Okay, brilliant. That's looking good. Okay, so let's delete all this out, I think would be a good idea. And let's have an empty page. So I've deleted that, hit save, reload, nothing there. Apart from the layout, as you'll see, the layout at the top has all stayed. We're leaving that alone for now. So I want to create a list. So what we can do is you can do standard HTML. So we could go UL, an unordered list, and we could create a list. Copilot's giving suggestions already, but I just want something hard coded. And we can say member1, and then we can duplicate that 3 times. Oh, no, that's 1. That's 2, no, not 11. Okay, and that's 3. And then let's end the unordered list. Save that, and we'll see that in the page, we've got members 1, 2, and 3. That doesn't look very nice. So let's go over to Vuetify and let's have a quick look at what the examples they've got. So I have Vuetify here open, and let's go to getting started. And let's have a look at their components. So we don't have to do the installation because Nux is taking care of that for us, which is amazing. So we can actually go straight to the components, and we can have a look at what they've got. So I'm interested in the list, so let's have a look at this list. You can have it in a card. Okay, that looks quite interesting, and you can always click on code and have a look how it looks. Pretty good, a lot of information. I don't think we're gonna have that much information, but we could reduce it. Maybe we'll try that. Let's give that a go. We can always change it. So it's saying V cards, and it's saying that it's going to have margin auto, which just enters it, and it's going to max width of 400, and it's going to be tiled. Let's have a look. So you know what? Let's grab the whole example. Oh, in fact, you've got a copy button here. Thank you very much. It will have template. So let's remove all of that, paste, and let's just save it and have a look, see how it looks. Okay, I like that. It's got a bit too much information, so let's remove some of these. I don't think we need the third line, do we? We can ditch the third one, and let's give it a save. Let's let it reload. I think that looks better, because what we could have up here is the person's name. So we could have their name, and then we could have their GitHub username. So this would be lowercase name, and then this would be their location. So if I save that, how does that look now? That looks quite nice. So now actually what we want to do, this is actually the list item. So we want to actually remove the first list item and have a 2-line item, because it'll be name and location, and GitHub username we can add later if we want. So now let's duplicate this one. So we should have 2 of them. So we could say name 1, location 1, name 2, location 2, a bit like before. Let's just check it all works. Okay, we now have 2 items on the list. But we don't want to hard code this. We want it to be dynamic within the HTML to make the HTML a lot less. And also then we can replace it with the API. So next thing we're going to do is create a script section, and we're going to hit enter. And it's auto completed some of these, but we're going to make this a lot simpler. We're just going to have export default, and we're going to have data to start off with. Data is going to need to return Data is going to return an object. This is the data available within our component, and we're going to have items, and let's have that as an empty array. Let's see what Copilot does. So let's create the first item. It's saying create the beginning of an object. Perfect. And it's saying name 1. Okay, I like that. Location 1. Copilot. Saving me a lot of typing and liking this. Let's see if it does a second one for us. See, when it comes up in gray, I just hit tab and it auto completes. This is brilliant. Okay, perfect. So we've got that. So we've got data, but this is actually duplicated. So let's delete this, and if we save it, we will see only 1. But there is data available within the page. So let's see what we can do next. So if we go to the list, we can have a look at actually some of the examples. This is a great way to learn how people do things. So you can see it's got a v-for, so view for loop, items, I in items, and it's going to create the key using the key from the array. So I think we can do the same. So let's grab that. It looks good. So we're going to want to loop over this. Let's make it all in one line. So here we're going for items. That's the name of our data here. Perfect. And we're going to loop over it. Okay, brilliant. So if I save that now, we should see 2 on the page. And we do, but the data is repeated because we're not actually using the data in the array. So next we can change the data. So let's see how they did it. They're using this property, a vtext. Let's do the same in ours. So we can say here, let's remove this and put vtext. And the value of vtext is going to be item dot location. And we're going to do the same up here for the name as well. Vtext equals item.name. So now, after I save it, we should see those change to be 1 and then the second one to be 2. So let me hit save, let it reload, and you can see the second one's changed to 2. So if we want to add a third one, we could use Copilot to do it for us, or I could just duplicate it like this as well, put 3, hit save, and you can see there'll be 3 in the list, but the HTML is still really consistent. So that's really nice. Yes, this hard-coded data is growing, but we're going to replace that with the API in a moment. So I'm really happy with that. I like that. So let's leave that for the moment. Let's jump into the API, because I'm sure you're all excited to get into the API. So let's go to the NestJS docs and go to their documentation. It's going to be very similar to the Nux. So we're going to say nest new project. I've already have it as a global install in my npm packages. So I'm just going to use nest new and the name of the project. So let me go here. Let me open a new tab. I'll do that in a minute. So we have the UI. So I want to say nest new, and I'm going to create it as an API folder. So here we go. And it's saying, do you want npm or yarn? I want to choose npm. We'll let it do its magic. But as I mentioned before, it will create a Git folder. So it will be a Git repo, which we don't want because we want the parent to have both of them. So we can just delete the .git folder. If you're having them separate repos, then do keep it and don't delete it. Okay, it's saying it's done that. So as I mentioned, I want to delete in the API folder .git folder. So therefore it doesn't have the history there. And we can actually go into the API and we can run it, and it says cd into API, then do npm run start, but I want to use run start dev so it automatically reloads. So now the API is booting up. Let's go to the browser and let's have a look. It's going to be running on 3000, which conflicts with the NuxtJS project. So we actually, in the API, need to do one thing and change it, the main.ts, and to change it to 3001. So let me run it again, and now it's going to run on port 3001. We go back to the browser, and if I refresh this, oh, not with members, refresh it, it says hello world. So our API is working, and let's just double check that. So in the API directory, let's go to where it all kicks off. So it goes into the source directory, it goes into app controller, and here you can see it's got a get. So that's going to be the API get, but because it's got no parameters, it's going to be on the root of the project. As you saw, it said localhost 3000. And then it goes into the get hello service. Let's change this, instead of hello world, well, let's just say hello EddieHub. If I save that, go back to the browser and refresh it, it says hello EddieHub. So we know the API is working on port 3001. So what we want to do next is actually, let's get some JSON out, and we want it to match what we had in the front end here. So actually what we could do is we'll hard code it in the API and then connect the front end to it. That way the front end thinks it's real data, and then we'll go back to the API and then we'll change it to connect to the database. And the UI won't need to be changed at all, because if it's hard coded in the API or reading to a database, the UI will know no different. So what we're going to do is in the API, go to the app controller, and we're going to make another get. But this time we're going to pass it the parameter of members. So you have to go to localhost 3001/members, and then we're going to say get members. Oh, thank you very much, Copilot. But no, it's not going to be a string, it's going to be an array, but I want to leave the TypeScript off now to keep things simple for everybody. And yes, we are going to want to return from the app service get members. This is great. It is red because we haven't created it yet. So let's create that next. So get members, no parameters, and it's saying return members. But we want to return an array. So let's go back to the front end file and grab this array, copy it, and actually let's delete it. So when I save it in the front end, there'll be no list on the front end. It's gone now. And if we go back to the backend file and paste this in, so we're going to return an array. So it's the same data we had in the front end. But as you can see, the front end is no longer showing the data because it hasn't got it. And then we're going to save this. If we refresh this, it's going to be no difference. But if we go to /members, you can see now it works. Name 1, 2, and 3. And that's what we have in the app service in our API. So we've got an API working straight away. But even though it is working, we go to our front end, we refresh it, no data. That's because we deleted the data in Vue and we haven't connected it to the API. So we connected to the API. It's so straightforward. I think people shouldn't get hung up on all this terminology. Just get started, let your hands dance, as Danny Thompson would say, and just practice. And if you get stuck, ask for help. People want to help. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to create a fetch method. It's going to have no parameters. And let's see what GitHub Copilot says. It says return. Not quite what we want. We don't want to return it. We want to save it to the items in this component. And then we're going to want to do an await on a fetch. So let's do a fetch. It's come up with a temporary URL, but that's not the one we're going to need. We mustn't forget this needs to be async as well. So let's fetch HTTP. Localhost 3001. And then we want members. And we mustn't forget that we actually then want to have the response returned as JSON. Oh, we can see Copilot's auto-completing that for us. Perfect, thank you very much. We don't need these extra brackets though. Save that. So what's gonna happen? The page is gonna load. It's gonna load immediately with no data, but then immediately the fetch will fire on the component and it will call this data and populate the array. So if we look back at the data, we get an error, and that's because our API and UI are running on different ports. So you've probably heard of CORS before. As you can see, this error is saying it has a CORS error. So the API is blocking it, which is fine, really easy fix. do not stress. We're not the first people to solve this. We go to the main.js where we change the port. But now we just say app.enable CORS. And we're going to pass no parameters in. We're keeping it default, and it should then reload. And if we go back to the UI and refresh it, now you can see name 1, 2, and 3 coming from the API. But if you don't believe me, come over to the network tab in the developer tools, click on members, and we see 3 there that have come from the API. But let's prove it. Let's go to the API and change it. So let's add a 4th member. Is Copilot going to help us? Yes, it is. Perfect. Thank you, Copilot. I'm going to save that. The UI wouldn't have refreshed because it doesn't know the API has changed. But let's go to the API, let's refresh the API, and you can see 4 has appeared. So let's go back to the UI and refresh, and we should see a 4th. So now we've got a full stack app working end to end, but with hard-coded data in the API. So shall we replace the hard-coded data in the API with real data from the database? Next, you want to go over to sign up to DataStax's Astra. It's free, and you can sign in directly with your GitHub. Let me show you that now. I hit sign in, and we're straight away in. And you can see I've got some databases and some data already, and you can see they give you $25 per month of credit. I think I've got more this month, not sure why, but thank you very much. And I've used less than $2, and I've been using it a lot. So it's an amazing free tier, and you can just connect using REST, which is just awesome. So what you'll need to do, if it's the first time you use it, is create a database. And then once you create the database, it will open. And the next thing you want to do is create a key space. And a key space is like a namespace. So imagine you have different clients in your database, or different clients or different customers. Usually you'd have a field in, if it's a SQL database, a column, for example, or if it was NoSQL like Mongo, you would then have a field that would have the client's identifier. So every time you perform a search, you would then make sure you need to filter for that client, and you could forget that. What I really like about DataStax's Astra is the key space, you can split out the data so there's no mistake. You don't accidentally get data from one client and serve it to another client. It is divided, so all the documents in a collection in that key space are specifically for that project, that client, that customer, however you do it. So it's really good. So create that. I've called it NextJS. That's what we had on our live stream. I know we're using NuxtJS, but I've got data in there from our live stream, so I'm going to just keep using that as well. So next thing we want to do is we want to replace this with real data from our database. What you'll see is in the dashboard on Astra is they have a connect tab. And then you can choose where you want to connect: document API, graph API, REST API, and they've actually got examples. So here you go, you've got Node, you can download example projects. It is really good. I'll let you have a play. What I'm going to do is go straight to the JavaScript SDK. As it says, you will need to create a token so you can connect to the API, and you can create it here. It's really simple. You just give it a name, it gives you a token, and then you just use that in your application. But treat it like a password though, it is private. So I'm going to use the AstraJS collection. So I've gone to their documentation and I'm just going to install it for our API. So let's go to our API. Let me open a new tab. Oh, it hasn't opened in the right direction. So let's go downloads, repositories. What did we call the project again? NuxtJS, NestJS. Copilot. Okay, and so let's go into the API directory, make sure we install it in the right place, and let's install AstraJS collections. The next, it says you need these environment variables, and these you'll get from your dashboard. So I'm going to set these off screen so you don't see my private keys. Well, you know what? I can set them on screen, and in video editing, we can blur them out. And then this is how you connect. So what NestJS recommend is you use their config module, which is really straightforward to get started. If we go to their technique section and then go to configuration, we need to then install also the config module. So let's install that in the API as well. And you're going to see how straightforward it is to get started. All you need is to add this to your module directory. So let's do that while it's installing. So let's go to app module, and on imports, we're going to import the config module. Oh, we mustn't forget to add it to the top. There we go. So now that's done. Now what we can do in the API directory is create a .env file, and this is where we put the environment variables. And this should be in the gitignore folder, so you can't accidentally commit your private keys. So let's have a look. Do you see .env? I have it as a global ignore, but just in case you don't, do put .env, make sure you don't commit this. And what we're going to do in the env, just like they suggest, AstraJS documentation, we're going to need these fields. So let's have a look. So in here, I'm going to put the tokens, the Astra application token, database ID, and the region. And now that's done, we can actually close the module. We don't need that anymore. We can go straight to our service. So in the service, what we're going to want to do is create a client. So it's as easy as this. So we can include this in there. So we're going to want to include the client at the top. We'll need to make this an async function as well. So what this does is it creates a client for us connecting to AstraDB. And these properties will be populated via our end file. So you've got AstraDB ID, AstraDB region, AstraDB application token. Do we name them the same? Or we name them slightly differently? Okay, that could have been a bug, but let's fix that now. So we have the token, and then we have the database ID, which will be this one. And then we have the region, which will be this one. So that will then create a client for us to connect. And to get this data, you're going to see how straightforward it is. So the next thing we're going to want to do, let's look at the documentation. What does it say? It says you need to get the namespace and then the collection that we want. Okay, sounds good. So let's, oh, it's kind of autocomplete for us. So we'll say const, and we will say collection. And we will want to use the Astra client collection. We need namespace first. Astra client namespace NextJS to have existing data. And then we want the collection members. Okay, perfect. After that, it says we can just say get, and we can use a get for a specific ID. We could use a query for an equals, or we could just have an empty object to get all of them, which is what we're going to want to do now. So in here on this return, let's have const members, and we're going to say it's going to be an await, and it's auto-completed for us. I don't think we need the to array. So we're going to save that there, and then let's just replace all this hard-coded data with members. Save it, and let's have a look at the browser and the API, and it works. As you can see, this is real data coming out of the database. Okay, but one thing you'll notice is the ID is not in the object, the ID is in the key, which is great sometimes because you can then grab it out of the collection really fast. But that's not how our UI will work. So either we need to remap the data in the UI when we grab it, or we remap it in the API. I prefer to remap it in the API. So to remap this in the API, what we can do is we can grab the keys from the object, and then we could do a map on it, and the map will be a key. Oh, it's auto-completing for us. And it's going to want to return the members out of the key. That is correct. However, we want to add the ID as well. So what we could do is we can spread the members, but also add the property ID, which will be the key. And so now if I save that, let's have a look at the API. So this should no longer be an object, but should be an array. And then there'll be no key because it's an array. And the actual value here of the ID will be a field called ID. Let's refresh it and find out. There you go, see it's changed to an array. Now the same unique ID is still there, but instead of being the key, it is now under the field ID. Perfect. So could we go to the front end and just refresh? Would that work? And then that should change the data we see here. We have name, we have location, we have ID. We're not doing anything with GitHub at the moment, but that's fine. Refresh. There you go. Eddie, Portugal, NuxtJS test, Maya, Israel. Let's have a look. Eddie, test 2, Maya. It looks correct. So now we've got a fully end-to-end from the front end, from the browser, all the way to an API layer, all the way to a real database that's in the cloud. And we didn't have to do any schemas, anything complicated. I mean, you can do that with Astra. If you want to extra performance, you want some extra features, you can do that, but you don't have to worry about that to get started, which is brilliant. So we've got that. So that looks pretty good. I did say we were going to do a form so we can save some data. So let's give that a go. So let's go back to the front end for now, and then we'll add it to the back end afterwards. So in here, we're going to want to add a form. So I suggest we go to the Vuetify docs and have a look at their forms. This form looks nice. I'm happy with this. Don't need anything that complicated. Let's have a look. What have we got? Okay, so let's grab the form out and we'll talk through it as we go. We will need to wrap this in a div. So therefore there is a kind of single within the template, a single parent. So let's do that as a div. And then now up here, don't worry, it will automatically tell you. Vue is very good at giving you good errors and good feedback. This is getting quite long, this page, so you'd want to move this to another component. Again, for simplicity, I'm not going to do that right now. Although for simplicity, moving it to a component would make it a lot easier. So here we go, we've got a form. It's going to validate it. I want to remove the validation. We don't want that. We've got a container, we've got a row, we've got a column. Okay, I like those dimensions. First name, we'll change that to name because that's what we want. We don't want any rules. Is there a counter on duration? Let's leave that in. I'll show you what that does. That's pretty cool. We're just going to have name. And is it required? Yeah, it's required. And the second one we should have as location to be the model. That's where we're going to get the data. I'll show you that in a moment. We're not going to have any rules. We can have a limit of 15. And what we'll see on the label, what is displayed on the page is location, and it's required. And we could add the GitHub if we wanted. It again, it's going to have no rules. It will say GitHub and it's required. So we actually need to create these properties. So in the data function, we just have items. So we actually do need to create the other ones. So we do need to create name. Thank you very much. Copilot. Oh, location, yes. And GitHub. Copilot, you just saved me typing that out and making typos. Okay, that looks pretty good. So if I hit save, we should see that on the page. My VS Code has reformatted that, thank you very much. And now we see a form. We'll make this a bit smaller so we can see it on the page. We've got name, location, and GitHub. Oh, no button, we do need a button. So we will add another column and we will keep it the same. 12.4, thank you. And we're not adding a field to that, no. We are going to put in a button, which is, we're going to remove the validation check. We can have it as a color as success. And click validate. No, we're going to want to submit it, but we will leave that off for now. That won't let me comment it out. Or actually, you know what? Let's put that back in, and instead of validate, let's have save. And then we can match that with a function below. So if we come down to here, let's just create another function called save. And we're going to have the event, and let's have a look. Prevent default, yes please. We are definitely going to want to prevent the default. And no, that's it for now. So save, and we can do a console log. So we could do console log of the data. So let's console log the name. So let's have a look. Oh, it needs to be this name because it's in this component. When you refer to any of these, they need to be this. Okay, so save that. Let's have a look. I made a mistake. I actually need to put save under methods. Hey, Copilot has suggested already. Thank you, Copilot. Suggested it earlier though. Okay, now there won't be an error. It will find the function. And if we just say, this is a live test for the name, well, it's gonna be too long. You can see it's already saying it's 12 out of 10. It's too long. So just say live demo. There we go. And validate, we should change that to save. You can see now in the console log, let me make that a bit bigger, it says live demo. So it works. Okay, great. So let's change the name of that from validate to save. And what we want to do is we want to send this to the API. So what we want to do is not just have name, we're going to want location in GitHub, and we're going to want to make a post request to the API. Let's just prove it all works. Make sure I haven't made any other mistakes. So we'll say location and we'll say GitHub. Okay, so if I save that, run it again, and if we just go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, that's what we should see in the console. Yes, we do. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3 down there. Okay, perfect. So we're getting the data from the form, and now we need to post it to the API. But the API doesn't deal with posts yet, so we'll need to add that as well, and then save that to the database. But it's literally going to be only a few lines of code. You're going to love it. So let's jump back to the API, and we're going to go to the controller, and we're going to add a post. So we'll say a post, and it's going to go to members still. So yes, thank you very much, Copilot. And it's going to be post member. Okay, that sounds good. Perfect. And we're going to call the service post member, or we could say it's save member. Maybe save member rather than post member. You choose. I'll leave it as post for now. And it's red because in the service doesn't have that yet. So now we need to make the post members service. So this is no longer red and passes the data and we can actually save it. But we're not going to want to copy and paste these lines again for the other method, so we want to make that reusable. So what we can do is we can go async get client, and then we could put these in there. So we grab those and put them here, and then we could return the collection. So here we can say return, and then that way in here we can do something like this where we can say this get client. And there's different ways that it can be done. You could do it as a class variable. There's different ways. So actually let's separate these and make it simpler in multiple lines. So let's say const collection equals get client. We've got that, and that should still work. So you know what? If we make any more changes, let me save this. I won't save the app controller because that's still red. I want to make sure that it still works on the API as it did before. So hit refresh, still works, no errors. Brilliant. Okay, so that's really good. Always check every little step as you go along, which is why I love automated testing. More than happy to do more videos of automated testing. If that's useful to you, let me know. Okay, so now that works, we can then do another function, which is async, and it's going to be post members or save members. And we need to save it to Astra. It's going to be so simple, you're going to love it. So let's get the collection again, and it's going to be get client. And let's have a look at the documentation. Copilot is suggesting it, but I have a feeling it's not insert. I have a feeling it's save. Let's have a look. It's create. Okay, perfect. So what we need to do is actually, you can pass the ID, but if you don't want to, you can just do the create. And we don't have the ID, so we just want to do the create. So next up, we want to say const result equals collection dot create, and we want to create member. But to give ourselves a little bit of protection, because we don't know what people are going to pass in through the UI, we should actually define what fields we want saved. It's actually good practice. And also validation is even better practice, and filtering out any bad data. But we could do stuff like this. So we say ID is member. No, we don't have an ID. So we could say name is member.name. And if we're using TypeScript properly, we would be having a definition like a DTO, data transfer object, with the types interfaces, which makes this a lot easier. So we don't have email, we have location, member.location, and then we do have GitHub, and it's member GitHub. Perfect. And we want to return the response. We probably want to return the actual ID that is created. So we could actually just return the ID, but we could also return the object data with the ID. So let's have a look. So we could say return, and we want it to be an object, and we're going to want an ID, but it's not going to be .id, it's going to be document ID. That's what comes back from Astra. And then let's have the rest of the data. Yes, so we will spread it with the data that they actually sent in. So the data they sent in with the ID. If you want to be belt and braces, you could do another fetch to get the data using the ID to make sure it was saved, but having the ID means it got saved. So we go back to the controller. Post member is red. Why is post member red? Post members, no, it should be singular. I typed that wrong. Post member now is no longer red, and we should be able to save it. And we could test this by doing Postman, or I have a REST client installed here. But you know, for simplicity, actually it's not simpler, but let's just test it. I want to see if we can run before we can walk, and let's see if we can get this to work straight away in the UI. Let's have a look. So in the save, we've got the console log. We'll leave that there for now if you wish. And we need to do another fetch like we did before. So let's have a look. So we could do an await, and it's a fetch, and it's going to be to the same URL. So let's copy that to save time. But we actually don't want to make a get. So by default, it makes a get. We need to make a post. So what we can do is we can pass an object with some parameters, and the method's going to be post. Yes, thank you. We are going to want headers, and then we are going to want it to be content type of application JSON. Perfect, finish that off, brilliant. And then next we are going to want a body. So we're going to want to send the data to have a body, and we're going to want to stringify it. And then the data we're going to want to send is name from this .name in the component, location, yes, and GitHub. Perfect. Copilot, really making it faster. Then after that, we will do like we did before, and we will put a then, and we will return the JSON. And then after that, we could console log it, We could then add it to the page. There are a few things we could do. So let's just console log it and check it works. Then we can make it even nicer. So if we go back to here, we have an error. What's the error? We need to make this async now. That's the error we've got. Save it. Reload's looking better. Okay, brilliant. So we should see the ID in the console log on the bottom right, and then we're going to get it to add it to the page. So here we could say real database. Oh, it's gone over. So let's just put AstraDB location in the cloud, and the GitHub we could just say AstraDB all lowercase. Hit save, and we get an error. What is the error? Oops, I put the then on the wrong part. So I need to put the then not on the stringify, but on the fetch. So that's my mistake. And so reading the error messages is important. If we refresh the page and let's try again. So we were saying AstraDB, we're saying it's in the cloud, and the GitHub was AstraDB. Let's hit save. And we have a 500 error, which is fine. It means it sent the data. So we could actually look here in the network tab and it says that it got sent. So we can look at headers and we scroll down. We should see it have a body, and it's the body that we want. And it went to the right URL with a post. But let's have a look on the console for the API and see what it says. Cannot read property name of undefined. Okay, so let's have a look what went wrong with the API. This is where automated tests, like really, really helpful. So it came in here. So we could put a console log in here and make sure member comes in. So let's have a look. Let's do that, and console log member. And remember this this will be on this console log. So it's reloaded. So let's just send this again. Yes, we'll get the 500. And let's have a look. It says undefined. This is correct because it doesn't come in like that in the data. We actually need to tell NestJS where this data is coming from. And we do this by saying it's coming from the body because it's a post. So now this will look a lot better, trust me. Then we do a save again. As you can see, this is what got sent. And let's see what in the console on the terminal, what the API thinks got. Yes, so if it thinks it got that, great. That's brilliant. Okay. And that's looking a lot better. So it came through to there, so we can remove that console log now. And then in here, it should have come here and actually saved the data. So let's have a look. If we go to members here, we could see the response. So this is what was sent, we know that. Response, you can see it's got an ID with the data we sent and the ID. Okay, brilliant, let's add it to the page. So it is working, and let me prove to you it's working by refreshing the API. So here we have, how many? We've got Eddie, Maya, so it's gonna be, we are looking for it to say AstraDB, and if I search the page, AstraDB is not in the page. If I hit refresh, and I search the page, you can see it's AstraDB, and this ID will match as what we had in the browser as well. Okay, so now we're going at rapid speed. Let's have a look at adding it straight into the browser. So what we could do, we could add another then. So if I put this to the next line, we could say then, we've got the JSON, and we could add it to the bottom of the items array. So let's try that. So here we could say this items, and we could say push on the response. And actually we could all do that on one line, which will look a lot nicer. And so it should get added to the bottom without us refreshing the page. So at the bottom, we have manually inserting data. So let's say test number 2. Location, I'm currently in Portugal. And my GitHub, we all know is this. Hit save. Okay, if I scroll to the bottom, is it added? Test number 2, Portugal. So as you can see, it's added. If I refresh the page, it is persisted. It is now at the top because we haven't sorted the data. We're getting back from the API, so the data order could change. But you can see that has worked and saved it in the cloud. If you cloned this project and had my tokens, you would get this data. And again, I can refresh to show you the data is persisting in the database. So we have get and all the way working from the back end all the way to the front end, and we have save working all the way from the front end, going to all the way to the back end, and coming back again in the get. You get the idea. It's a lot of gets. So now you know how to get data from the database and send data to the database. What I suggest you do next is create another form. It has a search keyword, and when it's submitted, it brings back the data from the database and it filters the results. So maybe if someone's searching for Eddie, it brings back all the ones that are called Eddie. And that's the way you will learn so much, is by actually doing and trying and making mistakes. And if you have any question, leave a comment below and let me know what you build. I do live streams every Friday where I review your open source projects. So if you build something, let me know. I'd love to see it, to see what you're building. And we are going to do an amazing swag giveaway live streams, and we need to look at your projects, see what you build. So go play with any front-end framework you want, any back-end API you want, but use AstraDB so I get to see what you use it for. Don't forget to join us in our Discord so you can chat to me and the community between live streams and video, link in the description below. In this tutorial, you will learn how to build a full stack application using NuxtJS, a Vue framework for the front end, NextJS, NestJS, not Next, terrible start. Come over to your network tab in the developer, right, 8th video lucky.